a hand on wood. Layla could hear it, not slapping or knocking, just the palm pressed to a hollow panel. The skin stuck for a heartbeat on old varnish and lifted, then a softness like wool rubbing wool. "It's warm," the woman said. "Something warm on the other side." Described the warmth. Like breath, not like air from a vent. Like someone's mouth. But the mouth is a wall. "Is it saying anything?" Leela's kitchen grew smaller. The plant in the window shrank into its pot like a child hiding in a coat. Wax on wax. The recorded air thickened as if all the people in the tape had drawn nearer to the door they dared not open. "Yes," the woman said. "What is it saying?" "It's saying. It's humming. No. It's getting the room ready. It's listening to see what it needs to become." Layla whispered, "What does that mean?" The woman laughed a little. "I don't know," she said, honest. "It is like when you stand in a doorway and you know you're going to say hello or scream and the door is deciding which one of you it wants," the man said, carefully. "Step back." There was a tiny delay, and Lila knows the sound of obedience and disobedience both. This was disobedience wrapped in obedience's coat. The woman stepped back, but not far. "Good," the man lied. "We'll bring you home now." Someone adjusted a dial. The organ whispered a chord that meant the end in every hospital room in the 1970s. The hum folded itself up neatly. Layla sat very still for a long moment. Her phone vibrated and she jumped. A message from Maizen, her friend who delivered gear around the city for a living and collected rumors like a cat collected sun patch. "You still want old tape decks?" Found a Revox. "Heaviest sign." She smiled and typed, "Always. Later tonight." Then she deleted the message, typed "tomorrow's better," and sent it. She didn't want anyone here tonight who might say the smart thing out loud. She slid in the third tape, Night Log 6. And this one was different from the first second. Different in the way a late shift is different from a morning one. The tape hiss was louder, the rune tone thicker. The voice speaking was a man's, but a younger man than the first, and he sounded like he thought someone would listen to him later and judge him. He was trying to be precise. "Night log, station in 6. He said, "Begin time 2:11. Direct feed from the corridor. Door marking, Gabscure, possibly 12 under lacquer. We applied the hush frequency at anchor 3, then 2, then 4. Responses as follow." He paged through paper. It sounded like pages being turned underwater. He cleared his throat. He'd been taught not to clear throat on mic. The training had stuck, and defying it made him feel dangerous. At 3, he read a knocking. At 2, metal. At 4, he hesitated. Layla leaned in because the pause was not from forgetting. It was from fear, like stepping onto ice that made the sound of a music box. At 4, humming, but not like before. It repeated me. Not a whisper. It made my words again and set them out in the room. When I said log, it said log. When I said begin time, it said begin time. When I said my name, he stopped. Breathing filled the tape. Many lungs now. A scrape. Someone behind glass in the room with him shifted. He continued in a thinner voice. I said my name, he said, and it said my name, but not the name. I said, not how I say it. It was my mother's voice saying it through a wall. Layla found that she was smiling. It was not an amused smile. It was the smile of someone hearing a legend try to stand up. We recorded for 13 minutes, he said quickly now, eager to end. The guide reported heat through the panel. I recorded echoes, not hours. Playback yields interference. That sounds like a hiss there. Never mind. Transcripts follow. He read a page. He made a mistake and corrected it too quickly, and Lila felt an affection for him that scared her. Because affection in stories like this was a rope you handed the thing you couldn't see. She paused the tape and listened to the apartment. The fridge exhaled again. The clock checked its own pulse. From outside, the shudder of a bus passing over a broken patch of road came up through the floorboards like a memory of a stampede. Layla looked at the lined towel in the box. She remembered the typewritten line. If you hear your own name, don't be afraid. They do that sometimes. She pressed play, and at 2:19, the young man he called himself Kareem on the page continued. The backfeed started. The tape changed shape. That's the only way she could describe it. Some recordings kept their architecture no matter what you did. A room is a room. A voice is a voice. Tape hiss is tape hiss. You can measure it and place it on a graph. This one unmoored. It lengthened. It sank. The walls of the station, she could see them now. Tiled and grim, moved away and then leaned in as if breathing. Backfeed, in normal engineering, meant a signal fed back into an input. A loop, a howl. This was not a howl, though. It was a return. A quiet tide coming back exactly the way it left the shore, but with the shore's footprints in it. She heard her own apartment. A chair creak. The shape of her kitchen, the softness of the towel. She heard the recorder's own motor on the recording of itself, impossibly. Like a mirror catching a reflection of a mirror down a hallway. Then a voice said, clear and easy and pleased with itself. Layla. The name rang gently in the air, the way a fork rings after you tap it, and it pretends to be a bell. She was aware sharply, embarrassedly of herself in the room, of her lungs and hair and the skin on the inside of her arms. She thought briefly of calling Mazen anyway. She thought of throwing the tapes away. She pictured picking up the shoebox, walking to the alley, setting the box in the metal waste bin the building used for paper and cardboard, and dropping a match. She pictured the way flame would travel between the layers of towel and tape. How fast, how clean, how absolute. Then she pictured waking at 3 in the morning to the smell of static again, and the box on her table, the towels still folded, the kind of memory you cannot convince your body you invented. She pressed play. The voice had named it not return. In its place came the guide's breath again, slow, measured, only slightly faster now, and a false calm in her words. "I didn't open it," the woman said. "I wanted to, though. It wanted me to. What would happen if you did?" Kareem asked, beyond his instructions. He lifted the recorder again, though his hand trembled. Unidentified figure spotted at approximately 12:42 a.m. vanished before confirmation. Could be a trespasser. Or he cut himself off. He didn't want to say, or something else out loud, "The stairs below." By 1 o'clock, Daniel found himself in the eastern wing, where the fire had left blackened scars across the ceilings and walls. His boots crunched over charred debris as he explored, flashlight beam flickering against twisted metal frames and collapsed floors. That was when he saw another message, this one carved directly into the soot-stained wall. "Don't listen to them." The letters were jagged, gouged deep as though scratched by something desperate. A chill swept through him. Who carved it? A patient? A squatter? Or someone else entirely? He pressed on until he found a stairwell leading down. The steps descended into darkness, the air growing colder with each step. His flashlight beam quivered as though the light itself resisted. At the bottom, he found a heavy steel door. Faded letters above it read, "Basement Records." The door was ajar. Daniel hesitated, then pushed it open. The basement stretched before him, lined with shelves upon shelves of old files and boxers, all decaying with time. Water dripped steadily from pipes above, forming stagnant puddles on the concrete floor. The smell of mildew was suffocating Daniel. And then he heard it, a whisper. At first, he thought it was the hiss of leaking pipes, but as he held his breath, the sound grew clear, distinct syllables forming words. Daniel. His blood ran cold. The voice came from deeper in the basement, weaving through the shelves like a serpent. He raised his flashlight, but the beam barely penetrated the darkness ahead. "Come closer." His throat tightened. The rational part of his mind screamed to leave, to get out while he still could. But his legs moved anyway, drawn forward by some compulsion he couldn't explain. The whisper grew louder, multiplying, overlapping dozens of voices murmuring at once. Some pleading, some commanding, all speaking directly into his skull. He staggered, clutching his head. His flashlight clattered to the floor, spinning in wild arcs before coming to rest on something at the far end of the aisle. A chair. And in it, a figure strapped down, head lolling to the side, skin pale as wax. Daniel's breath caught. He stumbled backward, but the voices surged, louder, filling his ears until he thought they would burst. The figure's head jerked upright. Its eyes snapped open, and it screamed his name. The Forgotten Asylum. Daniel stumbled backward, his heart hammering so hard it drowned out every other sound. The figure strapped to the chair was pale, its mouth twisted open in a scream that carried no air, just raw vibration that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The flashlight beam quivered in his shaking hands as he aimed it straight at the figure. For one horrific moment, its eyes glowed with a wet, glassy sheen, pupils blown wide, staring directly into him as though it knew not just his name but every secret he had ever buried. And then it was gone. The chair sat empty, the straps hung loose. The puddle beneath it reflected nothing but the unsteady circle of light from his flashlight. Daniel's breath came ragged, his throat dry. He pressed the recorder button with trembling fingers. 1:27 a.m. Encountered. Manifestation. Apparition restrained in basement chair. Screamed my name. Vanished upon direct observation. Cannot confirm physical presence. Experiencing auditory hallucinations. Multiple voices whispering from walls. Possible exposure to mold. Or something else. Even as he spoke, he knew he didn't believe his own rationalizations. The voices had been too sharp, too personal. They hadn't spoken to anyone. They had spoken to him. He forced himself to keep moving, scanning through the endless rows of shelves. Boxers sagged with water damage, files curled and blackened with mold. But here and there, some looked strangely preserved, as though untouched by time. He pulled one free, brushing away dust. Patient file number 4983. Eleanor Marks, the same name from the office upstairs. His pulse quickened. He flipped open the folder. The handwriting inside was rushed, uneven, the ink bleeding into the page as though written in panic, notes scrawled between official entries. She hears them clearly. They do not lie. The experiments will continue. They must continue. Do not trust the staff. They are part of it. The walls feed. Daniel's hands shook as he turned the final page. It was blank except for one line written in that same jagged script as the letter that brought him here. She is waiting for you. He slammed the folder shut, breath ragged. The corridor of shadows. Daniel turned to leave, desperate to get back upstairs, when the basement light's ancient, rusted fixtures flickered on all at once. His heart nearly stopped. He hadn't touched anything. There was no power in the building. The long rows of shelves stretched away, illuminated in a sickly yellow glow. And in that glow, he saw them. Figures. Dozens of them, lining the aisleways, standing between shelves, motionless, watching. Their faces blurred in the flickering light, features indistinct, as if the shadows themselves clung to them. Some wore tattered hospital gowns, others heavy restraints, their heads tilted at impossible angles. None of them moved. None of them spoke. Daniel's legs locked, every instinct screaming to run but his body refusing to obey. Then, one by one, the figures began to tilt their heads in unison, the motion perfectly synchronized, as though controlled by a single unseen hand. The whispering rose again, deafening now. A tide of voices layered atop one another, words he couldn't parse. Yet they pressed against his skull until pain blossomed behind his eyes. He staggered backward, tripping over a loose file box. The crash echoed through the basement like a gunshot, and the lights died, plunging everything into darkness. The whispering cut off instantly. The silence was worse. Daniel scrambled for his flashlight. His breaths ragged, the beam stuttered back to life, illuminating only empty aisles. The figures were gone, but the chair at the end of the hall was no longer empty. The return of Elena. This time, she didn't vanish. The woman sat strapped to the chair once more, but now her head was upright, her eyes glassy yet fixed on him. Her lips moved slowly, cracked and pale, forming words that scraped the silence. "You shouldn't have come." Daniel's skin prickled. He raised the recorder, though his hand shook. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Her lips parted wider. "Eleanor." The name slammed into him like ice water. Eleanor Marks. The patient from the files. He took a step closer, against every instinct, his reporter's drive forcing him forward. What happened here? Her eyes rolled back, and when she spoke again, the voice was layered hers and dozens of others, all speaking through her mouth. They fed on us, used us. The walls remember. The walls never forget. You hear them too now, don't you? The voices swelled, filling the room though her mouth barely moved. Daniel clapped his hands over his ears, but it made no difference. The sound was inside him, rattling his skull, gnawing at his sanity. "Why me?" he shouted. Her gaze snapped back into focus, sharp and piercing. "Because you listen." Her body convulsed violently, the straps creaking against the chair. The lights above flared, buzzing with unnatural energy, and then exploded in a shower of sparks. Daniel threw his arms over his head. When he looked again, the chair was empty, and the whispering was gone. Escape denied. Daniel bolted for the stairs, his boots slamming against concrete, his breath tearing through his lungs. He didn't stop until he burst back into the charred eastern wing, gasping for air. The corridors above seemed quieter, less suffocating, though his hands still trembled. He needed to get out, to process, to breathe. Air that didn't stink of mildew and old screams. He pushed toward the main lobby, flashlight beam dancing across crumbling walls. The double doors at the entrance came into view, and relief washed through him. Until he reached them. They were shut! Daniel gripped the handles and yanked. They didn't budge. He pulled harder, throwing his weight into it. Nothing. He could see the rain outside through the cracked windows. He was right there, but the doors might as well have been welded shut. Panic surged through him. He dropped his gear, throwing his shoulder against the wood until pain lanced down his arm. The doors didn't move. A faint sound trickled down the hallway behind him. Footsteps. Slow, dragging, uneven. Daniel froze, sweat beading on his forehead. The steps grew louder, closer, echoing through the empty lobby. He spun, flashlight raised. The beam landed on a figure moving down the corridor toward him. Not a shadow this time, something solid. It wore a hospital gown, stained and torn. Its skin was ashen, stretched taut over bone. Its head lolled unnaturally to the side, but its eyes, those eyes were alive, glistening with hunger. And behind it, more figures emerged. One, then another, then dozens, spilling from the darkness. The asylum's forgotten, the patients. The horde shuffled closer, their bare feet dragging across cracked tiles, each step echoing like a drumbeat in Daniel's skull. Their mouths hung slack, drooling, whispering syllables that made no sense, yet he felt them inside his bones. Daniel backed against the sealed front doors, his flashlight beam jittering across ashen faces and twisted bodies. There were too many. Dozens. Maybe more. Their eyes glimmered like oil-slick reflections, catching the light in unnatural ways. His hand fumbled for the recorder, his voice breaking as he pressed the button. 2:14 a.m. Multiple apparitions, no. Entities manifesting in physical form. Trapped inside, Della whispering surged, drowning his words. One of the patients, Eve? That's what they were, lurched forward with a sudden burst of speed. Its nails scraped against the door, inches from his face. Daniel swung the flashlight, the beam slamming across its hollow features. It shrieked, a piercing wail that made the others shudder back. Light. Light. They recoiled from the beam. Daniel seized the chance, forcing his way sideways through a gap, bolting down the corridor as the mob clawed after him. His boots slammed across the floor, his breath ragged, his flashlight beam jerking wildly across the ruined walls. The doctor's office. He burst into a side hall, slamming the first door shut behind him. The flashlight revealed an old office disjoked. The desk collapsed under the weight of fallen plaster. A framed photograph still hung crooked on the wall. A man in a white coat, stern-eyed, his arm draped around a woman who looked uneasy beside him. Daniel lifted the photo. The placard beneath read, Dr. Victor Halloway, Director of Grayfield Asylum. The name rang through him like a bell. He remembered it from his research. Halloway, the controversial figure accused of conducting unapproved experiments on patients in the 1960s. Official reports claimed the allegations were unsubstantiated, but rumors whispered that dozens of patients disappeared under his care. Daniel rifled through drawers, shoving aside brittle papers until he found a locked journal. The leather was cracked, the clasp rusted. He smashed it against the desk until it split. The pages inside were filled with spidery handwriting, each line more frenzied than the last. They are not insane. They are conduits. The voices in the walls. They come from beyond. I can harness them. I can feed them. The asylum is alive. It needs vessels. I will give it what it demands. The final entry chilled Daniel to his core. If anyone finds this, know that I did not fail. I became part of it. The asylum is eternal. And now, so am I. A sound stirred behind him. Daniel turned slowly. The man from the photograph stood in the corner. White coat, in tatters, skin gray, eyes glowing faintly. Dr. Halloway smiled. The bargain. Daniel's throat closed, his body frozen in place. The doctor's presence was different from the other sharper, more controlled. While the patients moved like broken marionettes, Halloway radiated purpose. You listened, the doctor asked, his voice both spoken and whispered inside Daniel's mind. Few do. Fewer survive. Daniel forced words out through trembling lips. What do you want from me? Halloway stepped forward, his features shifting in the flicker of the dying flashlights. Sometimes human, sometimes skeletal, sometimes something far worse. The asylum needs a keeper, he said. One who will listen, one who will write our truths, carry them beyond these walls. You came because you were called. Because you cannot resist. Daniel's chest heaved. I'm not part of this. I don't, the whispers roared, cutting him off. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, plaster bulging like lungs, paint cracking as though veins pulsed beneath. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor, reaching for his boots. You already are, Halloway whispered. The moment you stepped inside, you belonged to Grayfield. Daniel staggered back, flashlight flickering. He raised the recorder, desperation in his voice. No, I'm not your vessel. I'm not! The doctor's hand shot out, cold as stone, gripping his wrist. You are ours, Daniel Carter, and you will never leave the hidden chapel. Daniel tore free with a burst of adrenaline, slamming the flashlight into Halloway's face. The doctor staggered, snarling, and Daniel bolted out the door, sprinting blindly through twisting halls. The asylum seemed alive now, corridors shifting, walls groaning as though to trap him. He stumbled into a stairwell, racing down until he emerged into a cavernous chamber beneath the basement. A chapel? Rows of rotting pews faced an altar carved directly into the stone wall. Candles long melted into stalagmites clung to every surface, and behind the altar loomed a mural painted in dark strokes. Daniel's stomach twisted. The mural depicted the asylum itself, surrounded by figures in chains, their mouths open in silent screams. Above them, a monstrous shape spread across the sky, an indistinct mass of eyes and mouths, dripping into the building below. At the altar lay more patient files, dozens of them stacked neatly, as though tended even now. Each one bore names he recognized from his earlier research patients who had vanished, their disappearances written off as bureaucratic errors. In the center of the altar sat a single tape recorder, old and duscate. Against all reason, Daniel pressed play. A voice crackled through. distorted by age. Dr. Halloway's "The asylum is the doorway." The voices are the hunger. We keep them fed, and they keep us eternal. To resist is to be consumed. To join is to live forever in the chorus. The recorder clicked off. Behind him, footsteps scraped. Daniel turned to see Eleanor the patient from the file standing in the aisle. Her restraints hung loose, her eyes vacant, but locked onto his. "You can't fight it," she whispered. "I tried. We all tried, but it takes everyone in the end." Daniel's grip tightened on his flashlight. "There has to be a way out." She shook her head slowly. "There's only one way." Her eyes flicked to the mural, the monstrous shape above the asylum. To join the walls. The final choice. The shadows in the chapel stretched, crawling up the pews, reaching toward him. The whispers rose again. Not chaotic this time, but rhythmic, like chanting. His name pulsed through it. Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. Halloway stepped from the darkness behind Elena, his smile wide, his hands outstretched. "Write our story," he urged. "Tell the world what we are. Become our voice. Become eternal." Daniel's mind spun. He saw the choices laid bare before him. He could submit, become part of this living nightmare, another whisper in the walls, or he could defy them, even if it meant dying in the attempt. His recorder was still in his hand. He lifted it, his voice hoarse. Final entry. Grayfield Asylum is alive. It feeds on those trapped within. Dr. Halloway and his patients are not gone, they are part of it. If this recording escapes, let it be a warning. Never come here. Burn it. Salt the ground. Destroy it before it spreads. The walls convulsed, shrieking in fury. Halloway roared, lunging toward him. The shadows surged. Daniel slammed the recorder onto the altar, smashing the play button so his words echoed through the chapel. Then he raised his flashlight, its dian beam pointed directly at the mural. "Then hear this," he shouted. "I will not join you." He hurled the flashlight with all his strength. It struck the mural, shattering the brittle wall behind it. Light burst through. Moonlight. A fissure cracked open, spilling silver beams into the chapel. The shadows recoiled, shrieking, the voices breaking into chaos. Halloway howled, his form flickering, unraveling into smoke. Eleanor screamed not in pain, but in release as she dissolved into light. Daniel ran. Epilogue. The escape. He burst through crumbling halls, guided by moonlight cutting through shattered windows. The front doors that once refused him now swung wide with a groan. Rain hammered down outside, washing the whispers from his ears. He didn't stop running until the asylum was a silhouette against the horizon, its walls shuddering as though in rage. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the black mass of stone one final time before darkness reclaimed it. Daniel collapsed on the wet ground, gasping, clutching the recorder still buzzing faintly in his palm. His final message had been captured. Proof. But as he lay there, catching his breath, a faint sound crackled from the recorder, not his voice. Halloway's, you listened. And now, you belong to us. The tape clicked off. Daniel stared at the machine, his heart sinking. The whispers began again, faint at first, curling around the edges of his thoughts. He had escaped the building, but Grayfield Asylum had already followed him. And so ends our tale of the Forgotten Asylum. But some doors once opened, never truly close. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more long nights filled with horror and mystery. Until the next story, keep the lights on and the whispers out.